Thank you for joining me for another reading through the Bible in chronological order. We are in 2 Samuel 11 and 12 and 1 Chronicles 20. In the spring, when kings march out to war, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and strolled around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing, a very beautiful woman. So David sent someone to inquire about her, and he said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to him, he slept with her. Now she had just been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Afterwards she returned home. The woman conceived and sent word to inform David, "I am pregnant." David sent orders to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the troops were going and how the war was going. And then he said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the palace with all his master's servants. He did not go down to his house. When it was reported to David, Uriah didn't go home. David questioned Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a journey? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah answered David, "The ark, Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my master Joab and his soldiers are camping in the open field. How can I enter my house to eat and drink and sleep with my wife? As surely as you live and by your life, I will not do this." "Stay here today also," David said to Uriah, "and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited Uriah to eat and drink with him, and David got him drunk. And he went out in the evening to lie down on his cot with his master's servants, but he did not go home. The next morning David read a letter to Joab and sent it to Uriah. And in the letter he wrote, "Put Uriah at the front of the fiercest fighting, then withdraw from him so that he is struck down and dies." When Joab was besieging the city, he put Uriah in the place where he knew the best enemy soldiers were. Then the men of the city came out and attacked Joab, and some of the men from David's soldiers fell in battle. Uriah the Hittite also died. Joab sent someone to report to David all the details of the battle. He commanded the messenger, "When you finish telling the king all the details of the battle, if the king's anger gets stirred up and he asks you, why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you realize they would shoot from the top of the wall?" Athibaz, who struck Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth. Didn't the woman drop an upper millstone on him from the top of the wall so that he died? Why did you get so close to the wall? Then say, "Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." And the messenger left. When he arrived, he reported to David all that David had sent him to tell. The messenger reported to David, "The men gained the advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we counterattacked right up to the entrance of the city gate. However, the archers shot down on your servants from the top of the wall, and some of the king's servants died. Your servant Uriah the Hittite also died." So David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab: Don't let this matter upset you, because the sword devours all alike. Intensify your fight against the city and demolish it. Encourage him." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah had died, she mourned for him. When the time of mourning ended, David had her brought to his house. She became his wife and bore him a son. However, the Lord considered what David had done to be evil. Chapter 12. There were two men in a certain city. Verse 1. So the Lord sent Nathan to David, and when he arrived, he said to him, "There were two men in a certain city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very large flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one small ewe lamb that he had bought. He raised her, and she grew up with him and with his children. And from his meager food she would eat, from his cup she would drink, and in his arms she would sleep. She was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man could not bring himself to take one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for his guest. David was infuriated with the man and said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. Because he has done this thing and shown no pity, he must pay 4 lambs for that lamb." Nathan replied to David, "You are the man. And this is what the Lord God of Israel says: I anointed you king over Israel, and I rescued you from Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. And I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that was not enough, I would have given you even more. Why then have you despised the Lord's command by doing what I consider evil? You struck down Uriah the Hittite and the sword and took his wife as your own. You murdered him with the Ammonite's sword. Therefore now the Lord will never leave your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own wife. And this is what the Lord says: I am going to bring disaster on you from your own family. I will take your wives and give them to another before your very eyes, and he will sleep with them in broad daylight. You acted in secret, but I will do this all before all Israel and in broad daylight. And David responded to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Then Nathan replied to David, and the Lord has taken away your sin. You will not die. However, because you treated the Lord with such contempt in this matter, the son born to you will die. Then Nathan went home. The Lord struck the baby that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became deathly ill. David pleaded with God for the boy. He fasted, went home, and spent the night lying on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he was unwilling and would not eat anything with them. On the 7th day, the baby died. But David's servants were afraid to tell him the baby was dead. They said, Look, while the baby was alive, we spoke to him, and he wouldn't listen to us. So how can we tell him the baby is dead? He may do something desperate. When David saw the servants were whispering to each other, he guessed that the baby was dead. So he asked the servants, Is the baby dead? He is dead, they replied. So David got up from the ground. He washed, anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went to the Lord's house and worshipped. Then he went home and requested something to eat, and so they served him food, and he ate. His servants asked him, Why have you done this? While the baby was alive, you fasted and wept, but when he died, you got up and ate food. He answered, While the baby was alive, I fasted and wept because I thought, Who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me and let him live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I'll go to him, but he will never return to me. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba. He went in to her and slept with her, and she gave birth to a son and named him Solomon. And the Lord loved him, and he sent a message through the prophet Nathan, who named him Jedediah, because of the Lord. Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal fortress. Then Joab sent messengers to David to say, I have fought against Rabbah and have also captured its water supply. Therefore now assemble the rest of the troops, lay siege to the city and capture it. Otherwise, I will be the one to capture the city, and it will be named after me. So David assembled all the troops and went to Rabbah. He fought against it and captured it. He took the crown from the head of the king, and it was placed on David's head. The crown weighed 75 pounds of gold, and it had a precious stone in it. In addition, David took away a large quantity of plunder from the city. He removed the people who were in the city and put them to work with saws, iron picks, and iron axes, and to labor at brickmaking. He did the same to all the Ammonite cities. Then he and all his troops returned to Jerusalem. First Chronicles chapter 20. In the spring, when kings march out to war, Joab led the army and destroyed the Ammonites' land. He came to Rabbah and besieged it, but David remained in Jerusalem. Joab attacked Rabbah and demolished it. When David took the crown from the head of their king, it was placed on David's head. He found that the crown weighed 75 pounds of gold, and there was a precious stone in it. In addition, David took away a large quantity of plunder from the city. He brought out the people who were in it and put them to work with saws, iron picks, and axes. And David did the same to all the Ammonite cities. Then he and all the troops returned to Jerusalem. After this, a war broke out with the Philistines at Gezer. At that time, Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Sippiah, a descendant of Rephaim, and the Philistines were subdued. Again, once again, there was a battle with the Philistines, and Elhanan, son of Jair, killed Lami, the brother of Goliath of Gath. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. There was still another battle at Gath, where there was a man of extraordinary stature, with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He too was descended from the giant. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of David's brother, Shimei, killed him. These were the descendants of the giant in Gath, killed by David and his soldiers. So our reading today focuses upon a dark time in David's life, though God will continue to bless them militarily. But it is a dark time because both books, Chronicles and Samuel, remind us that it was the spring when kings march out to war. It was the time of battle. David remained in Jerusalem, we're told in both accounts. Instead of fulfilling his obligations as king, he remained. And that decision is what put in motion the rest of the story of his sin with Bathsheba and his murder of Uriah. It's difficult to fathom someone who loved God so much like David to do what he did. But at times when we neglect our obligation to the Lord's will is usually not important to us. And in that moment, that was true of David. So let it be a lesson for us that what we learn from David is that when we neglect the obligations we have, that will be the most opportune time for sin to become appealing. Choose God, and the blessings will come. Tomorrow, join me for another reading through the Bible in chronological order.